Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Trump's Gaza plan faces uncertainty. Government shutdown looms over disaster response on North Korea continues nuclear development. Joseph Kabila receives death sentence. Internet shutdown disrupts Afghanistan. A former FDI targeted by Chinese spies. Iranians deported under Trump deal. Sanctions against Russia increase. Ecuador attacks fuel political turmoil. Ukrainian prisoners exchange for military services. United Services Fatalities. Madagascar practices in Fatalities. Madagascar causes Vietnam. And there's large currency. Seizure code used to those via euros. Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan, a complex and uncertain path. Donald Trump's renewed push for a Gaza ceasefire hinges on a 20-point proposal. Yet its ultimate success remains highly uncertain. The plan, unveiled alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, aims to secure the release of all remaining hostages, both alive and dead, within 72 hours of Israel's public acceptance. A timeline already under pressure. Netanyahu has warned that Hamas rejection, citing its past intransigence, could lead to Israel continuing military operations independently. Central to the plan is the establishment of a multi-leader international body, chaired by Trump, intended to oversee the transition and ensure lasting peace. This body would include Arab and Israeli leaders, reflecting a significant shift in Trump's approach. However, this move has already drawn criticism, particularly from Israel's far-right coalition government, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who threatened to topple the government if the agreement includes provisions they oppose, specifically regarding the Palestinian Authority's role. The plan's immediate focus is on securing the release of hostages, a critical factor given the ongoing pressure from families and the international community. Despite Trump's optimism, Netanyahu's skepticism is palpable, fueled by past experiences and the potential for Hamas to undermine the agreement. The conflict's devastating toll, over 66,000 Palestinian deaths, underscores the urgency, but also the immense challenges. Previous ceasefires have been short-lived, demonstrating the difficulty of achieving a sustainable resolution. The ongoing Israeli military assault on Gaza City, aimed at dismantling Hamas' last strongholds, continues to escalate the conflict. International scrutiny remains intense, with a recent UN inquiry concluding that Israel committed genocide against Palestinians. The plan's success depends on securing Hamas agreement, a hurdle considering the group's past behavior and the continued military pressure. The international community's role will be crucial in mediating and monitoring the agreement, navigating the complex political landscape, and mitigating potential setbacks. The situation remains fluid, with the outcome far from certain, and the path to a lasting ceasefire fraught with challenges. Imminent government shutdown threatens weather and disaster response. A looming government shutdown poses significant risks to both weather forecasting and disaster response capabilities in the United States. The core issue centers on a protracted political standoff, primarily concerning funding for government operations. This situation is exacerbated by ongoing staffing reductions within key agencies, notably the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FMA. NOAA faces critical staffing shortages, stemming from layoffs and early retirement incentives, having reduced its workforce by over 560 personnel since the Trump administration. This impacts daily weather balloon launches and 24/7 operations at local forecast offices. Despite these reductions, NOAA asserts that storm forecasts will continue uninterrupted, while FEMA's ability to effectively respond to disasters is increasingly jeopardized. FEMA's diminished workforce, particularly administrative and support staff, raises serious concerns about its capacity to manage disaster relief efforts. The agency's reliance on the Disaster Relief Fund offers some protection to frontline responders, but broader operational disruptions are anticipated. Furthermore, the agency's reliance on external federal agencies and its vulnerability to political interference are intensifying challenges. The shutdown's impact extends to FEMA's resilience and mitigation programs, which would cease operation, alongside the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, which would stop issuing new policies. Both NOAA and FEMA are preparing for a shutdown, but uncertainty remains regarding the extent of disruptions and the potential for delayed or compromised response times. The situation is further complicated by the increased scrutiny imposed by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who now requires approval for all grants and contracts exceeding $100,000. This bureaucratic hurdle adds to the operational strain. Both agencies are attempting to maintain essential services, but the overall outlook remains precarious, with the potential for significant delays and reduced effectiveness during a critical weather season and disaster preparedness period. The agencies are operating under considerable stress, with the possibility of a prolonged shutdown compounding the challenges. North Korea's unwavering commitment to nuclear program. North Korea has emphatically declared its steadfast commitment to maintaining its nuclear weapons program, asserting that it is intrinsically linked to the nation's right to self-determination. This resolute stance was delivered by Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sun-yong during a speech to the United Nations General Assembly on Monday, September 29th. Kim Sun-yong's address underscored the program's significance as a fundamental defense mechanism, framing it as an unavoidable response to external pressures. The Vice Foreign Minister's remarks were characterized by a strong condemnation of international efforts to exert control over North Korea's nuclear capabilities. He explicitly stated that the pursuit of nuclear weapons represents a direct challenge to the country's sovereignty and, fundamentally, its right to continue existing. This assertion highlights the deeply rooted ideological motivations driving North Korea's policy. Kim Sun-yong's statement directly addresses ongoing international concerns regarding the country's pursuit of nuclear technology, particularly its development of intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching targets across the globe. The speech was a clear rejection of diplomatic pressure and sanctions imposed by the United Nations and other nations. The core message conveyed was that North Korea views its nuclear program not as an aggressive act, but as a necessary safeguard against perceived threats. The implications of this declaration are significant, potentially escalating tensions in the region and complicating ongoing negotiations aimed at denuclearization. The speech reinforces the narrative that North Korea's actions are rooted in a desire for self-preservation and resistance against what it views as global hegemony. The unwavering declaration signals a continued commitment to a strategy that prioritizes nuclear deterrence above all else. Joseph Kabila sentenced to death in absentia for war crimes and treason. Former Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, President Joseph Kabila has been sentenced to death in absentia by a Congolese court for war crimes, treason, and crimes against humanity. The charges stem from accusations of supporting the M23 rebel group responsible for widespread devastation in the country's eastern region. The conviction, announced Friday, encompassed charges including murder, sexual assault, torture, and insurrection. Kabila vehemently rejected the proceedings, labeling them arbitrary and asserting that the courts were being utilized as an instrument of oppression. His current location remains unknown. Kabila, 54, governed DRC for 18 years following his father Laurent's assassination in 2001. He transferred power to President Félix Tshisekedi in 2019, but relations deteriorated, leading to Kabila's self-imposed exile in 2023. Notably, he returned in May, expressing a desire to contribute to resolving the ongoing conflict in the east, even visiting the M23-held city of Goma. This action prompted President Tshisekedi to accuse Kabila of orchestrating the M23's activities, resulting in the stripping of his legal immunity and enabling his prosecution. Decades of conflict, exacerbated by the M23's recent territorial gains including Goma, Bukavu, and 2 airports, have fueled instability. The United Nations and several Western nations have presented substantial evidence implicating neighboring Rwanda in backing the M23, with thousands of Rwandan soldiers reportedly operating within DRC. However, Rwanda denies these accusations, stating its actions are intended to prevent the conflict from spreading across its borders. Despite a ceasefire agreement reached in July, violence persists. The situation is complex, involving accusations of foreign support, internal rebel activity, and ongoing instability within the DRC. The legal proceedings against Kabila represent a significant step in addressing the long-standing conflict, though his whereabouts remain a key unknown factor. Afghanistan grounded, internet shutdown cripples country. A nationwide internet shutdown imposed by the Taliban government in Afghanistan has brought the country to a standstill, severely impacting daily life, essential services, and international communication. The shutdown, initiated with the stated goal of preventing immorality, has effectively cut off Afghanistan from the outside world, causing widespread disruption and raising serious humanitarian concerns. Flights from Kabul International Airport have been canceled, and communication within the country has been severely hampered. The Taliban's decision to sever fiber optic internet connections across multiple provinces, beginning with a handful and escalating to a complete blackout, has left a significant portion of the population without access to vital information, education, and economic opportunities. Numerous individuals, including university graduates like Fahima Nouri and Shakiba, have described the internet as their last hope, particularly for accessing online learning and employment. Fahima, a law and midwifery graduate, had enrolled in an online university with aspirations of continuing her education and finding remote work, but these ambitions have been extinguished. Shakiba, from the northern province of Takar, lamented the ban on her midwifery studies, stating that her only remaining hope was online learning. The impact extends beyond education. Many residents, including shopkeepers like Najibullah in Kabul, rely on mobile communication for business transactions, and the disruption has effectively paralyzed economic activity. The situation has created a sense of helplessness, with residents describing a feeling of doing nothing as they are unable to engage in their normal routines. International news agencies have reported a complete loss of contact with offices in Kabul, and mobile internet and satellite TV services are severely disrupted. The Taliban's actions have been criticized by the United Nations, who warn of significant harm to the Afghan people, including exacerbating the country's already dire humanitarian crisis. The removal of books written by women from universities further illustrates the Taliban's restrictions on women's education and access to information, highlighting a systematic effort to limit opportunities for half the population. The internet blackout represents a critical setback for Afghanistan and underscores the ongoing challenges facing the nation. Jailed former Aide spied for China faces further allegations. A former aide to Maximilian Krah, a prominent member of Germany's far-right Alternative for Germany's AfD party, has been sentenced to 4 years and 9 months in prison for espionage activities conducted on behalf of China. Jian Guo, who served as Krah's aide in Brussels for 5 years until last year, was found guilty of providing confidential information and documents to Chinese authorities since 2002. The case has raised significant concerns regarding China's intelligence operations within the European Union. Prosecutors alleged that Guo acted as a handler for a Chinese national, Yaki X, who worked at Leipzig airport and was involved in gathering data related to cargo, flights, and passenger information. Yaki X admitted to passing on this data, but denied any involvement in espionage. The court deemed the case particularly serious, despite Guo's repeated denials of working for a Chinese intelligence agency. Adding to the legal complexities, Krah himself is currently under investigation by the Dresden Public Prosecutor's Office for potential money laundering and corruption offenses related to his role as an elected representative in the European Parliament. He has vehemently dismissed the accusations as absurd and politically motivated. Following his arrest, Krah immediately increased security measures in his office. Prior to his imprisonment, Guo had resigned from his seat in the European Parliament after being elected to the German Bundestag. The investigation into Krah's activities continues, highlighting the ongoing scrutiny of political figures and potential foreign influence within the European Union. The case underscores the vulnerabilities within political systems and the need for robust security protocols to prevent intelligence gathering and potential misuse of information. The investigation's scope expands beyond Guo's actions, encompassing Krah's conduct as a member of the European Parliament, further complicating the legal proceedings. U.S. deporting 120 Iranians following Trump administration deal. The United States is preparing to deport 120 Iranian nationals back to Iran, marking a significant step in President Donald Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement policies. This operation, facilitated through a cooperative agreement between Iran and the U.S., represents the first phase of a larger plan involving the deportation of approximately 400 Iranian citizens. These individuals, primarily apprehended entering the U.S. illegally through Mexico, largely without legal status. A key element of the arrangement involves the U.S. interest section at the Pakistani embassy in Tehran, allowing for a rare instance of collaboration between the two nations, which lack formal diplomatic ties. The deportations are being coordinated following a deal brokered by Iran. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson confirmed the administration's commitment to executing what she described as the largest mass deportation operation of illegal aliens in history, utilizing all available resources. The operation's goal aligns with President Trump's repeated pledges to curtail immigration to the U.S. Iranian Foreign Ministry official Hossein Nashabadi clarified that some of the deportees possessed valid U.S. residency permits and that U.S. officials sought their consent prior to the return. He subsequently appealed to the U.S. government to respect the rights of Iranian migrants and their citizenship rights under international law. The operation has drawn criticism from human rights groups, both within the United States and internationally, who express concerns about the potential risks faced by the deportees, particularly given Iran's documented human rights record and recent escalation in the use of the death penalty. Despite these concerns, the U.S. continues to pursue this deportation strategy, mirroring similar agreements reached with Panama and Costa Rica to remove migrants from those countries. The precise criminal records of the Iranian nationals being deported remain undisclosed. This operation is a notable instance of a U.S. administration prioritizing immigration enforcement through international cooperation, though it is met with significant ethical and humanitarian considerations. Agoa's uncertain future threatens jobs and African economies. The future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act Agoa, a landmark trade agreement between the U.S. and Africa, is in jeopardy, posing a significant threat to thousands of jobs and the economic stability of numerous African nations. The agreement, set to expire on Tuesday, faces uncertainty due to the Trump administration's imposition of tariffs and the potential for its non-renewal. This situation has triggered widespread concern across Africa, particularly within the garment industry. Kenya's apparel sector, heavily reliant on Agoa for exporting clothing to the U.S., is experiencing a drastic downturn. Factories like Shona EPZ, employing approximately 700 individuals, have seen output plummet by nearly a third, primarily due to buyer hesitancy following the 10% tariff. Without Agoa's duty-free access, the factory director, Isaac Maluki, fears potential layoffs and the loss of a $10 million investment. The impact extends beyond Kenya. Over 30 African countries currently export over 6,000 products to the U.S. under Agoa, encompassing textiles and agricultural goods. The agreement has historically created jobs, boosted industries, and provided African economies with a stronger foothold in global trade. However, the looming expiration necessitates a strategic reassessment by African negotiators. Trade policy expert Tinyo Lateo emphasizes the need for African countries to define their desired outcomes from the U.S. and to offer reciprocal benefits. African leaders are actively lobbying Washington, with Kenyan Trade Minister Lee Kinyanjui advocating for at least a 5-year extension. President William Ruto also seeks a deal by the end of the year, while South African President Cyril Ramaphosa warns of severe consequences. Simultaneously, several African nations are exploring alternative markets, including the African Free Trade Area, to shift towards higher-value manufactured goods. The urgency is palpable for workers like Joan Wembui, a garment worker at Shona EPZ, whose family's livelihood depends on her wages. Her story highlights the daily anxieties faced by thousands and underscores the need for immediate action. The situation necessitates a proactive approach, combining diplomatic efforts with strategic economic diversification to mitigate the potential damage to African economies and the vulnerable workforce dependent on Agoa. The future of trade hinges on swift and decisive negotiations. GOP representative calls for enhanced sanctions against Russia. Recent developments in the ongoing geopolitical landscape have prompted a strong statement from Republican Congressman Mike Turner, who is advocating for a significant escalation of sanctions against Russia. Turner, speaking via CNN, asserted the immediate necessity of implementing more robust measures aimed at curbing Russia's aggressive actions, primarily referencing its military operations in Ukraine. His call for intensified sanctions reflects a growing sentiment within certain segments of the Republican Party regarding the administration's approach to the conflict. Turner's argument centers on the perceived inadequacy of current sanctions to effectively deter Russia. He believes that a broadened scope of restrictions, targeting not only individuals and entities directly involved in the conflict, but also key sectors of the Russian economy, is crucial. Specifically, he suggested expanding sanctions to encompass energy, finance, and technology, aiming to severely limit Russia's ability to fund and sustain its military efforts. The congressman's comments come amidst continued international debate over the appropriate level of pressure to apply on Russia. While the United States and its allies have already imposed numerous sanctions, Turner contends that these measures have failed to achieve a decisive impact. He argues for a more aggressive strategy, emphasizing the importance of coordinated action among major global powers to maximize the effectiveness of sanctions. Turner's statement highlights a division within the U.S. political landscape concerning the best course of action to address the situation in Ukraine and underscores the ongoing debate about the optimal level of economic and political leverage to be applied against Russia. Ecuador convoy attack sparks violence and political tension. A humanitarian convoy, led by Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa, was violently attacked late Sunday night in Cotacachi, in Babura province, resulting in the abduction of 17 soldiers and escalating tensions surrounding a nationwide strike. Approximately 30 to 50 individuals ambushed the convoy, utilizing Molotov cocktails and causing significant damage to the vehicles, including those carrying UN and EU diplomats. The attack occurred while the convoy was delivering aid to communities affected by a national strike initiated by the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, CONAID, over fuel subsidy cuts. During the clashes, a CONAID member was fatally shot by the Ecuadorian armed forces, prompting a call for urgent dialogue from the UN Human Rights Council's regional representative, Jan Jarab, and demanding a thorough investigation into the death and injuries sustained. President Noboa responded by sharing images of the damaged convoy, condemning the attack as an attempt to obstruct Ecuador's progress and labeling the perpetrators as criminals rather than representative of the Ecuadorian people. Italian Ambassador to Quito, Giovanni Davoli, confirmed his unharmed status and strongly condemned the incident as a terrorist act, directed at the head of state. The Ecuadorian armed forces accused the protesters of injuring 12 soldiers and holding the 17 personnel hostage, further fueling the already heightened situation. Graphic images circulated depicting soldiers with blood on their faces, indicating the severity of the violence. The CONE leading the strike remains resolute in its demands regarding the fuel subsidy cuts. The attack has significantly intensified the political instability within Ecuador, raising concerns about the government's ability to maintain order and address the underlying grievances driving the protests. The situation remains fluid, with ongoing clashes and an uncertain outlook for the immediate future. The incident underscores the deep divisions within the country and the challenges facing President Noboa in navigating the ongoing crisis. Ukrainian convicts trade imprisonment for battlefield service. As Ukraine battles to repel Russian forces, a controversial strategy has emerged: the recruitment of convicted criminals into the military. Thousands of prisoners, including murderers, drug dealers, and burglars, are being offered early release in exchange for fighting until the end of the war. This initiative is driven by a desperate need for manpower and a willingness to explore unconventional recruitment methods. The program began with approximately 10,000 prisoners volunteering, primarily for infantry roles within a newly formed assault force spearheaded by President Volodymyr Zelensky. These individuals, many with extensive criminal histories, are being deployed to some of the most dangerous frontline positions, facing intense fighting against Russian forces. Notably, those with severe crimes, such as multiple killings and treason, are excluded from the program. Many of these convicts, like Roman Czech, are motivated by revenge, seeking retribution for the death of loved ones, in Czech's case, his sister killed by a Russian missile. Others, like Alexei, a former drug smuggler, believe their past experiences have prepared them for combat. The program's success is reflected in the high morale of the soldiers, many of whom are former inmates, who are recovering in makeshift barracks after deployments. Approximately half of those who have volunteered have already perished on the front lines, highlighting the immense risks involved. Despite the high casualty rate, the soldiers express a profound sense of patriotism and a determination to contribute to Ukraine's defense. They are often driven by a desire to atone for past misdeeds and demonstrate their commitment to the country. The Ukrainian government acknowledges parallels with Russia's own strategy of releasing prisoners to bolster its forces, with estimates suggesting over 200,000 Russian convicts have joined the fight. While Ukrainian officials maintain a distinction that Ukrainian recruits are motivated by patriotic feelings rather than financial incentives, the situation remains a complex and ethically challenging aspect of the ongoing conflict. The soldiers involved, many bearing numerous scars and shrapnel wounds, express a belief that their combat skills, honed through years of criminal activity, make them effective soldiers. They insist they are willing to pay the price for their service, seeking redemption through their contribution to Ukraine's defense. Madagascar's Gen Z protests escalate amidst government dissolution, and recent protests in Madagascar, dubbed Gen Z movements, have intensified following the dissolution of President Andry Rajoelina's government. The demonstrations, originating in Antananarivo and spreading to 8 other cities, are fueled by persistent water and power shortages. Initially sparked by the president's decision to remove the energy minister, the protests escalated dramatically, prompting police to deploy tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds. The UN's human rights chief, Volker Turk, expressed shock at the security forces' use of unnecessary and disproportionate force, including arrests, beatings, and the alleged use of live bullets. He urged restraint and the release of detained protesters. The protests began peacefully last week, but quickly gained momentum, demanding Rajoelina's resignation alongside the entire government. The president responded by announcing the government's dismissal and initiating a process for appointing a new prime minister. Despite this action, the demonstrations continued, highlighting the deep-seated public dissatisfaction. The UN reports indicate at least 22 people were killed and 100 injured, while Madagascar's foreign ministry disputes these figures, claiming they are based on misinformation. Adding to the complexity, reports suggest that some protesters engaged in looting and property damage, accusations vehemently denied by the Gen Z movement, which claims the actions were orchestrated by paid goons. The situation is further complicated by historical context, with Madagascar experiencing numerous uprisings since its independence in 1960, including a significant protest in 2009 that led to Rajolina's rise to power. The current unrest represents the most significant challenge to Rajolina's third consecutive election victory in 2023. The UN's condemnation of police actions and the ongoing public anger underscore the fragility of the situation and the urgent need for dialogue and a resolution to the underlying issues of power and water shortages. The movement's core demand the resignation of the president, and government remains a central point of contention. Indonesia school collapse, fatal disaster in East Java. A devastating school collapse in Sidoarjo, East Java, Indonesia, has resulted in 3 fatalities and the entrapment of nearly 100 students and workers. The incident occurred at the Al-Khozani Islamic boarding school during prayers, triggered by an unstable building foundation unable to support the construction of additional floors. Rescuers are battling against time to extract survivors from the rubble, with a total of 99 individuals receiving hospital treatment, many with critical injuries. 38 students remain trapped beneath the collapsed structure. The building, a 2-story structure, suffered a catastrophic failure, transforming into a pancake-like structure, with narrow voids, significantly hindering rescue efforts. Authorities are cautiously employing specialized equipment, including cranes and excavators, aware that shifting the concrete slabs poses a risk to trapped survivors. The search and rescue agency Basarnas is deploying units from across the region, equipped with specialized extrication tools. Amidst the chaos, distraught relatives have established makeshift camp at the school, anxiously awaiting news of their loved ones. A survivor, Kafa Ahmad Maulana, 17, was among those missing, while another, Muhammad Rijal Koib, 13, recounted the terrifying experience of hearing falling rocks and fleeing the building. He was injured by falling debris but managed to escape. The situation is incredibly challenging, with rescuers prioritizing safety while striving to locate and rescue those trapped. The unstable building structure and the potential for further collapse are major concerns. Authorities are preparing for a specialized operation, recognizing the complexity of the rescue and the urgent need to save lives. The ongoing efforts highlight the immense challenges faced by rescuers and the devastating impact of this tragic event on the community. The primary focus remains on locating and safely extracting all those trapped within the wreckage. Typhoon Boloy's devastating impact on Vietnam and Laos. Typhoon Boloy has caused significant damage and loss of life in Vietnam and Laos, triggering widespread flooding, power outages, and substantial structural damage. Initial reports indicate at least 8 fatalities, with the number expected to rise as rescue and assessment efforts continue. Furthermore, over a dozen individuals remain missing, highlighting the storm's destructive force and the challenges faced by emergency responders. The storm made landfall in Vietnam on Monday, bringing torrential rains, high winds, and massive swells that severely impacted coastal communities. 2 individuals were confirmed dead, and 17 others are unaccounted for, primarily due to the hazardous conditions and the potential for further casualties. The storm's intensity caused widespread damage to homes and infrastructure, disrupting power grids and isolating numerous villages. As Boloy weakened as it moved towards Laos, it continued to generate heavy rainfall, contributing to flooding across the region. The storm's passage has resulted in substantial disruption to daily life, with transportation networks paralyzed and essential services severely affected. Rescue teams are working tirelessly to locate and assist those stranded or displaced by the storm. The Vietnamese government has mobilized resources to respond to the crisis, including deploying personnel and equipment to affected areas. International aid organizations are also providing support, focusing on delivering essential supplies and coordinating relief efforts. The situation remains dynamic, with ongoing monitoring of the storm's trajectory and continued assessments of the damage. The primary focus is on securing the safety of those affected and mitigating the long-term consequences of the typhoon's impact, particularly in vulnerable coastal regions. Authorities are emphasizing the need for continued vigilance and preparedness as the region recovers from this devastating weather event. Largest cryptocurrency seizure in UK history. Chinese woman convicted. A Chinese national, Semin Qian, also known as Yadi Zhang, has been convicted in the UK following an international fraud investigation resulting in the seizure of approximately 55 billion worth of Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency seizure. The investigation, spanning 7 years and involving multiple jurisdictions, began with a tip-off about the transfer of criminal assets. Qian, 47, pleaded guilty to illegally acquiring and possessing the cryptocurrency after leading a large-scale scam in China involving over 128,000 victims between 2014 and 2017. The stolen funds were stored in Bitcoin assets, and Qian evaded justice for 5 years, fleeing China using false documents and attempting to launder the money through property purchases. Alongside Qian, Malaysian national Seng Hock Ling was also convicted of money laundering, having facilitated Qian's operations. Confiscation proceedings have begun to retrieve over 16.2 million from Ling, with the amount expected to fluctuate based on cryptocurrency values. The UK government is considering retaining the seized funds. The investigation involved several key figures, including Zhen Wen, a Chinese takeaway worker who was previously jailed for 6 years and 8 months for laundering scam proceeds and relocating to a multi-million-pound property in North London. Qian also acquired properties in Dubai worth over $500. The Crown Prosecution Service seized more than 300 million worth of Bitcoin from Wen. Investors, primarily older individuals aged 50 to 75, had invested hundreds of thousands to tens of millions of yuan in Qian's scheme, often encouraged by friends and family. Qian was referred to as the goddess of wealth. Deputy Chief Crown Prosecutor Robin Yl highlighted the use of cryptocurrencies by organized criminals to disguise assets. The conviction marks the culmination of years of dedicated investigation involving the Met's Economic and Cybercrime Command and Chinese law enforcement. UK Security Minister Dan Jarvis stated that the case sends a clear signal that the UK isn't a safe haven for criminals. The sentencing hearing for Qian and Ling is scheduled for November 10th. The BBC has contacted the Chinese embassy for comment.